G20 के प्रेसिडेंट के तौर पर भारत पूरी दुनिया का आह्वान करता है कि हम मिलकर सबसे पहले इस ग्लोबल ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट को एक विश्वास, एक भरोसे में बदलें। यह हम सभी के साथ मिलकर चलने का समय है और इसलिए सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास का मंत्र हम सभी के लिए एक पथ प्रदर्शक बन सकता है। वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था में उथल-पुथल हो, नॉर्थ और साउथ का डिवाइड हो, ईस्ट और वेस्ट की दूरी हो, फूड, फ्यूल और फर्टिलाइजर का मैनेजमेंट हो, टेररिज्म और साइबर सिक्योरिटी हो, हेल्थ, एनर्जी और वाटर सिक्योरिटी हो, वर्तमान के साथ ही आने वाली पीढ़ियों के लिए हमें इन चुनौतियों के ठोस समाधान की तरफ बढ़ना ही होगा।
I think our relations was before very good, and I think it will very good. And after this is of course conflict, it will all will good, because India and Russia a long time very good friends, very clever friends, very kind friends, and we very like Narendra Modi too in Russia, because he very clever man. We think you know, it's not so important who come to this G20, Lavrov or Putin. More important position, Russian position, and you can see our position that nobody in the world can't be isolated Russia in the world. And now we build a new order without hegemony dollars, without hegemony USA. We will have new currency, and I think it's very important things for all world, and for India too, of course.
Of course, the rail connection project is yet to be announced. The information we are hearing is it might be announced at the end of the visit or at the end of the G20 summit. It is not surprising. In fact, it makes perfect sense. There are talks about a GCC rail connection, a Gulf rail connection anyway, and it only makes sense for us to link with one of our biggest trading partners in India. Don't forget, in the Gulf region, there are more than 8 million Indian expats. So this will have huge economical and logistical benefits for India and for the Gulf countries, and especially for Saudi Arabia. Different people can look at things the way they like. I think what matters here is whether it's in Saudi Arabia's interest, whether it's in the Gulf interest, and whether it's in India's interest. And the answer to all of the above is absolutely. I don't think anybody wants to do anything for the sake of intimidating other persons at their own expense. That doesn't make sense. But as I said, there are 8 million Indian expats living in the Gulf region. There is a project to link the Gulf region by rail anyway, and it only makes sense for this project to be linked with India, which is one of the largest trading partners of the Gulf.
We are participating in this G20 summit, which closes the Indian presidency, and I would say that in this first session there's been a very strong call for the reinforcement of multilateralism and confidence in our joint ability to cooperate and to work together to face global challenges such as climate change. The discussion this morning has very much focused on this. On top of course, welcoming the African Union joining the G20 and congratulating the Indian presidency for their excellent leadership during this year. And in this first session, there was a joint agreement to fulfill the commitments taken at Paris and in the different international summits, and to continue to make progress to meet our targets in terms of climate action. There was a joint commitment to contribute to the upcoming COP28 meeting, and to deliver on our environmental and financial commitments in order to ensure that we effectively meet the targets that I hope will be set in the communiqué tomorrow, to treble the deployment of renewables throughout the world, and to reach in 2025 the peak of CO2 emission and pursue thus the path towards decarbonization of our economies.
जैसे आपने जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट में देखा, अमेरिका और भारत में बहुत बड़े पैमाने पर सहयोग कर रहे हैं, जिनमें से क्रिटिकल इमर्जिंग टेक्नोलॉजीज है, इंफॉर्मेशन कम्युनिकेशंस टेक्नोलॉजी है. हमने कुछ ऐलान किया जो इंडियन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक व्हीकल ट्रांजिशन के बारे में. हमारे DFC की तरफ से $8 बिलियन दे देंगे और इंडियन सरकार भी अपनी तरफ से इतना ही पैसे दे देंगे. हम स्टूडेंट मोबिलिटी के बारे में अलग अलग पार्टनरशिप्स अनाउंस किया, जिसके तहत अमेरिका और इंडियन एकेडेमिया एक साथ भी तावन कर सकते हैं.
Well, we're quite delighted at the leadership demonstrated by Prime Minister Modi and demonstrated by the Indian government during its presidency of the G20. Prime Minister Modi has sought to focus this summit to opening up space for the global south, to ensuring that the voices of many smaller developing economic countries that were often excluded from these forums are included and that they are heard. And so we are delighted at the development of the EU included as the member of the G20, and we are grateful to India's leadership in this regard.
India always spoke about being the voice of the global south. This thing has been made in G20 this time itself. How do you rate that, sir?
Well, it has always been important, and maybe put it this way, it was always a miss that you will have such forums for international economic cooperation running with the exclusion of large parts of the world. Now we are moving towards a direction that includes those parts of the world that were excluded. We share a lot of common challenges, particularly with respect to climate change. And those issues cannot be resolved through, exclusive approaches. They have to be inclusive. They have to include those affected and those that bear the most responsibility in guiding the world through these challenges.
How big it would be for the South African continent, South Africa and the African continent?
Sorry, just repeat your question.
Just repeat your question. How big it would be, sir, for the African continent with the inclusion in the G20?
Oh, it's very important, as I said. It's an important development to have the African continent included in such forums and processes. And we see it as an important step that signals more reform processes that we would like to see with respect to the United Nations Security Council, with respect to your global multilateral financial institutions.
And especially thank you, Narendra and Joel, for convening this event here. I think it is very important to remember that we launched the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment last year. And since then, PGII contributes to closing the global investment gap for quality infrastructure. As Emmanuel Macron already said, most about this initiative and all the activities we speak about today is already set, so I will not repeat it, just mentioning two questions. The first is we have to be active that these things can happen, and this is for me that we then have to also work on the infrastructure, the institutions that can work on financing, and for this I think it is also important to make the work of the World Bank successful. Germany will contribute an additional €305 million of hybrid capital to the World Bank, and this is one of the aspects which is a side of the activity here. We also try to work with Africa, and the Compact with Africa will convene in Berlin in November, also as a sign of creating infrastructure, developing economy, all the things we are together here.
The FSB's report and the IMF's report, FSB is concentrated more on the regulation, and IMF's looked at the macroeconomic implications. So the synthesis paper is something which the G20 membership will go through in detail. There is one more meeting under our presidency for the finance track in Marrakesh. I remember with great sense of responsibility and sorrow the earthquake which has happened very close to Marrakesh. I hope the people of Morocco are in a position to take on, and I was glad to hear the Prime Minister during this session in the morning that India stands with Morocco and we will be ready to do any assistance that the government of Morocco would desire us to do. So with that said, with a heavy heart, the next meeting was scheduled for Marrakesh, and there the FSB report and the IMF, which is the synthesis report, will be discussed, and the materials are all already available in public domain. So it is for the membership to take a call as to how it wants to move on it. A framework or a template, whatever be it. I don't think we've given it a name as yet. And also to now discuss whether it is going to be a regulation only and not a ban. I'm not getting into that debate. It is the reports, the synthesis, and also the early IMF report, both of which have been discussed. You're right in saying this report says this. It's up to the G20 membership to take a call on how it wants to move forward. And that you'll get to know more during the autumn meet of the World Bank.
I think they've done an excellent job. They've got to a successful declaration. I think the Prime Minister has done a great job on it. I think the G20 have come together on a number of topics. So,
very good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for the enthusiasm for the Global Biofuels Alliance. I can tell you, as someone who has been associated with the ethanol and biofuels story for something like a decade and a half, that today is a historic day, a moment for celebration and rejoicing, because a global biofuels alliance has just been announced by the Honorable Prime Minister, who, along with other world leaders, including two of the world's major biofuel producers, the United States and Brazil, and other countries who are consuming countries, producing countries of biofuels, 19 countries in all, and 12 international organizations have got together to form the International Biofuels Alliance.
First, I'd like to thank you for having us here and being in India. It's a great place and we're loving it here, and just to come and explore and have new opportunities. Being here in this media oasis and being part of on the side of the G20, it's a great opportunity to connect and to explore and have more opportunities to talk about, and just deliver the message and the objective that we have in the Ministry of Sport that reflects our vision that we're all looking forward to achieve, Vision 2030. So we're being part of this great vision, and it's just a journey that we want to explore with in India and with all over the world, and see the opportunities that we can start and open together.
Another subject that was addressed by them, as the Sherpa noted, was countering terrorism and money laundering. The leaders condemned terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and recognized that it constitutes one of the more serious threats to international peace and security. So, in conclusion, as you can all see, all G20 member states have come to New Delhi with a strong sense of responsibility about addressing the most pressing global challenges. Speaking for India, we are clear that no one left behind, as the Finance Minister highlighted.
There are 8 paras on the geopolitical issue, which is entitled Planet, People, Peace and Prosperity. All those 8 paras have 100% acceptance. All countries have unanimously supported the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. This is one declaration without a single footnote and without any chair's summary. This is a complete statement with 100% unanimity. This demonstrates both the Prime Minister's and India's great ability to bring all developing countries, all emerging markets, all developed countries, China, Russia, everybody together on the same table and bring consensus. Secondly, this has been the most ambitious presidency in G20's history ever, because the number of outcomes it has, both the outcomes and the annexed documents, are about 112, which is more than 2.5 times which has ever been achieved before. Thirdly, this presidency, if you go through the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, it has a huge India narrative, it has a huge India footprint, whether you look at the Deccan high-level principles on food security, whether you look at the Chennai high-level principles for blue ocean economy, whether you look at the Goa roadmap for tourism, whether you look at the Gandhinagar implementation roadmap for land restoration, or Jaipur call for enhanced MSMEs, all this will leave a huge footprint of India in G20. So one of the key achievements to my mind, one is that we've achieved a very major green development pact in today's world of climate action and climate finance. Every single country has come together to focus on green development pact, which has financing, which has focused on global greenhouse gas emission by 43% by 2030, which has a doubling provision of adaptive finance by 2025, which has a global biofuel alliance, which has completely new principles of life for sustainable development, which has ending plastic pollution, which has reducing disaster risk, and a whole lot of other components put together as the Green Development Pact of the leaders of G20 countries for a greener world of tomorrow.
Well, thank you, all my colleagues. This is, someone once said in a similar domestic action that was positive, this is a big deal. This is a real big deal. And I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership that we're talking about today. Building sustainable, resilient infrastructure, making quality infrastructure investments, and creating a better future. A future that presents greater opportunity, dignity, and prosperity for everyone. Last year, we came together as one to commit to this vision. And this afternoon, I want to highlight the key ways in which the United States and our partners are working to make this a reality. Economic corridors. You're going to hear that phrase more than once, I expect, over the next decade. Economic corridors. As we work to address infrastructure gaps across low and middle income countries, we need to maximize the impact of our investments. That's why a few months ago I announced that the United States will work with our partners to invest in economic corridors.
I'd like to commend the PGII launched by President Biden with the participation of Saudi Arabia in $20 billion. We look forward to the integration of the initiative and the Economic Corridor project, which is announced in this meeting. I would like to thank those who worked with us to reach this founding step to establish this important economic corridor. My best regard to you all.
Excellencies, when we launched the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment just over a year ago, we committed to building better infrastructure for better future in low and middle income nations. We committed to cooperate with these nations with an equal, non-predatory approach to create new opportunities and prosperity. Today's launch of the new economic corridor between India and the Middle East and Europe goes precisely in this direction and is a milestone in strengthening global interconnections. And that is why I want to thank Prime Minister Modi, President Biden, and all the others, Ursula von der Leyen and all the others who made it possible, for it's a very important thing. This will scale up our economy's growth, opening enormous potential for mutual benefit in the business sector. Obviously, Italy is ready to play a decisive role in this process, also through the unique expertise of Italian companies in the maritime and railway sector. And we want to contribute in building bridges between the Mediterranean and the Indo-Pacific, also in the fields of energy and digital connectivity via Africa and the Arabian Gulf. In the energy sector, we can work in different fields, including the production and transport of green hydrogen from the Middle East to the Mediterranean. We also support the European Commission on the Helmet project, a high-voltage submarine electricity interconnection that will link Italy to Tunisia. We are working to strengthen digital connections critical for innovation and growth between the wider Mediterranean and Asia. Lurama, Raman, named after India's Nobel laureate in physics, Raman, will connect Europe with India and involves major companies such as Google and Team Sparkle. However, we also are aware that there's still too much to be done to narrow the infrastructure gap with low and middle income nations, and this is why we will continue work on the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment during the Italian G7 presidency next year. Thank you.
I would now request the Honourable Prime Minister of India to press the light globe placed in the lectern before him and launch the Global Biofuel Alliance.
To support respective net zero targets, to solve the energy quadrilemma, to strengthen circular economy, and provide cost-effective and environmentally favorable